Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. It begins with silence, not the kind of silence that follows a battle or the hush before a prayer. This is the silence of absolute awe, of a soul confronting something it was never meant to understand. Somewhere, far above the smog-choked skies of Terra, in a sanctum veiled by secrecy and agony, burns a light that does not flicker. It roars invisibly, casting no shadow, searing through the Imperium with an intensity that rends apart the unnatural night of the warp. This is the Astronomican, the light of the Emperor, the guiding flame of the Imperium. It is said to be the greatest psychic construct ever conceived, and the most terrible. But the Astronomican is not a beacon built of steel and technology alone. It is a lighthouse made of screaming souls. It feeds not on oil or power, but on minds, on life, on psychic brilliance extinguished day after day to keep it burning. Tens of thousands die not once, but perhaps forever, in the service of this fire. Their names are forgotten, their faces never known, their deaths unremembered. And still the Imperium calls them necessary. Still the ships sail the void, guided by their anguish. Still the light must burn. The truth of the Astronomican is not written in history books or declared from pulpits. It is whispered by the haunted, the damned, and the few who have stood close enough to hear the echoes of lost souls. This is their story. The story of the lost voices, the broken minds, the sacrificial thousands whose pain illuminates the stars. This is the truth behind the Imperium's most sacred light. There is no miracle on the Golden Throne. There is only decay wrapped in gold, a god entombed in machinery, and a silence so deep it echoes across eternity. The Emperor of mankind, once a titan who strode the galaxy to bring unity and reason, now lies as a corpse sustained by ancient mechanisms, immobile and voiceless. Yet even in death, or something like it, his will continues to burn through the Astronomican, a flame that consumes not only those chosen to die for it, but the Emperor himself. His body is chained to the throne, and his soul is chained to purpose. At the heart of the Imperial Palace, buried beneath kilometers of stone, circuitry, and ritual, the Golden Throne is not a seat of power. It is a torture device. It was never built for this, never meant to hold the Emperor's essence for 10,000 years. Originally a gateway, a means to access the webway and grant mankind freedom from the warp's tides, the throne was hastily transformed into a psychic prison during the final moments of the Horus Heresy. When the Emperor fell at the hands of his favored son, mortally wounded and unable to sustain his divine crusade, his loyal servants entombed him in the throne to keep the Imperium from crumbling. A desperate act. A final gamble. And it worked. In the most horrifying way possible. Now the throne devours psychers, devours minds, and devours centuries. To sustain the Astronomican and keep the Emperor's flame flickering, the Adeptus Mechanicus and the High Lords of Terra feed him daily sacrifices. Thousands of psychers, offered up like cattle. They are consumed to maintain a connection that should never have lasted this long. The throne is breaking, they say. Its machinery groans, its lights flicker, and still, the Emperor does not speak. He endures. That is the word most often used. He endures because he must. Because humanity needs him. But what is endurance when there is no consciousness left? Some believe his mind is gone, shattered by 10 millennia of psychic warfare. Others insist he is still aware, still watching, still guiding the Imperium through the Astronomican's blaze. And then there are those who fear the worst, that what remains on the throne is not their Emperor at all, but something twisted, something hungry. The High Lords treat the throne as sacred, surrounding it with endless rites, ceremonies, and rituals whose meanings have long since been lost. The custodes guard it with more than loyalty. They guard it with existential dread, knowing that its failure means the end of everything. Tech priests chant Binharic prayers to components they no longer understand. Servitors replace relays and circuits while blindfolded, unable to even glimpse the throne's inner sanctum. And the Sisters of Silence walk its margins, mute and invisible to the warp, grim sentinels of a truth that cannot be spoken. Beneath all the protocol and piety lies a brutal fact. The Emperor's survival is a lie of omission. He is not alive in any human sense. He does not rule, command, or even breathe. He is a battery, a psychic engine, a god sustained by perpetual agony, his own and that of the tens of thousands immolated in his name. The light of the Astronomican does not shine from his grace, it shines from his prison. And so, Terra revolves around its silent monarch. The hive towers reach toward his immobile form. The Adeptus Custodes march in solemn patrols through the halls where no one speaks. The ecclesiarchy spins myths of his divine glory, obscuring the machinery that keeps his corpse glowing. And still, the sacrifices are made. Still, the throne drinks the minds of the innocent. Still, the beacon burns, because if it falters, all is lost. But at what cost? What does it mean for the Imperium that its greatest power source is also its most profane desecration? The Golden Throne is the heart of the Imperium not because it leads, but because it never dies. It is a necrotic center, pumping not blood but fire, fed by death and devotion. Around it spins the lie that the Emperor lives, that his will still guides mankind. But deep within that golden tomb there is no will, only necessity, only silence, only light. They do not scream when they die, at least not with their mouths. The psychers chosen to feed the Astronomican often die in silence, their bodies spasming in unison, their eyes boiling from within, their minds utterly disintegrated by the power of what they are forced to touch. There is no glory in their death, no beauty, no hymns or heroics, only the cold inevitability of obliteration in service to something they cannot understand. These are not warriors or saints, they are fuel. Every day, thousands of psychers are consumed in the soul furnaces beneath the imperial palace to keep the Astronomican burning. It is a number so vast it numbs the mind. These are not nameless masses from afar. They are sons and daughters, prophets and madmen, witches and seers. Many come from backwater worlds, where being born with psychic sensitivity is a death sentence whispered in the cradle. Others hail from hive cities where their powers erupt in terrible acts of destruction, hunted by the Inquisition before they ever understand who or what they are. And some, the rarest few, are taken young enough to never know the life denied them, raised in cages, taught only obedience, and prepared for their fate as if it were sacred duty. But there is no sacredness in the fate that awaits them. Once marked, they are herded aboard the black ships, the dreaded vessels of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. These ships crisscross the stars, harvesting psychers in a never-ending sweep, collecting the sensitive and the cursed. The journey is long. Few survive it. Fewer still understand what lies at the end. By the time they reach Terra, many have lost all grip on reality. Some sit catatonic. Others gibber and weep, broken by the psychic null fields and isolation chambers used to contain their volatile power. They are not treated as people. They are inventory. Inventory meant to be burned. When they finally arrive at the palace, they are not greeted as saviors. They are not thanked or blessed. They are processed. Thousands at a time. Tagged, categorized, scanned. The weak are incinerated immediately. The unstable are used for experiments by the Ordo Psychana or handed over to the Adeptus Mechanicus for purposes too esoteric and cruel to comprehend. The most powerful, those rare gems of psychic potential, are taken deeper into the earth, into chambers carved from the bones of old Terra, where the light of the Astronomican pulses like a heartbeat. It is these souls who become part of the choir. These are the chosen. Not because they are lucky, but because they are bright enough to burn. They are not told what will happen. There is no preparation. One moment they are standing in the chamber, the next their minds are ripped from their bodies, fused into the lattice of the Astronomican, used like tuning forks to resonate with the Emperor's power. Their consciousness does not survive the process. Their individuality is stripped away. They become nodes, conduits, batteries, and then they are gone. Thousands perish each day, and thousands more are brought in to replace them. This cycle has repeated for 10,000 years. 10,000 years of sacrifice, of minds burned like candles in the wind. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica calls it a sacred duty. The ecclesiarchy blesses it as divine service, but in truth, it is industrialized martyrdom, a mass execution on a scale so vast it can only be measured in stellar units. For every light year a starship travels guided by the Astronomican, a dozen psychers may have died. And what do they see before the end? Some whisper that in the last seconds, just before their minds rupture, they glimpse the Emperor himself, not as a man, but as a blinding presence, a storm of agony and brilliance. Others claim they see nothing at all, that death is instantaneous. But there are accounts, buried deep in forbidden records, of psychers who survived long enough to speak after being bound to the Astronomican's core. They speak in riddles, they scream in ancient tongues, and they always beg to be killed. There is no monument to these souls, no memorial. They vanish without trace, their lives spent in an act of cosmic maintenance. They are not mourned, for there is no time to mourn them. The Imperium must go on, the Astronomican must burn. And so, psychers continue to die in the dark, their only legacy a light that guides a trillion others who will never know their names. The black ships do not arrive with ceremony. They glide through the void like sharks, silent, inevitable, cloaked in fear. Their hulls are blacker than shadow, their engines humming with a quiet that feels like a warning. To see one in orbit is to feel a collective tightening of breath across an entire planet. There are no parades for them, no festivities, no banners, only fear and silence. When the black ships come, it means the harvest has begun. Across the galaxy, psychers are born every day. Most are weak, untrained, latent. Some never discover their abilities before they die. Others awaken in fire and madness, destroying their homes, their families, even entire cities. They are dangerous, unpredictable, and worst of all, they are beacons in the warp, invitations to daemons, walking catastrophes that can shatter the veil of reality. The Imperium has no choice but to hunt them. But in that necessity, cruelty finds its perfect camouflage. The black ships are operated by the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, but they carry more than just telepaths. Their holds are filled with fear, with chains, with silence. Accompanying them are Sisters of Silence, null maidens, who generate a psychic dead zone, robbing nearby psychers of their powers and their comfort. They are the antithesis of all that a psycher is, and in their presence, the gifted suffer. There are also Inquisitors, agents of the Imperium's most secretive branch, who oversee the process with dispassionate resolve. And then there are the Sanctioners, grim handlers who wrangle psychers like cattle, shock staves in hand, eyes empty of empathy. The process begins with identification. Sometimes it's a screaming child in a hive city, sometimes a dreamer in a feudal village, sometimes a visionary on a void ship who predicted one death too many. Once marked, they are taken, often violently, always finally. Families are not told where they go. Sometimes they are told nothing at all. Those who resist are silenced. Those who cry are ignored. It is not an abduction, it is a quota. Within the black ships, there is no light. The psychers are packed into containment cells, sedated, starved, and stripped of all individuality. The psychic null fields warp their thoughts. Many lose themselves before the journey's end. Voices whisper in their minds, real or imagined, no one can tell. There are stories of psychers clawing their own eyes out, of silent cells where the occupants simply vanished. And always, there is the knowledge that they are not being saved. They are being delivered. The journey to Terra is long. It may take years, depending on the warp tides. Time becomes meaningless. Some die in transit. Some are killed by their fellow prisoners. Some simply stop responding, their minds fading before their bodies. The black ships do not slow for them. They do not grieve. They are vessels of sacrifice, and the cargo is not meant to arrive whole, only useful. Upon arrival at Terra, the psychers are sorted like resources. Weaklings are executed immediately. The slightly stronger are sanctioned, bound by psychic disciplines, mutilated and branded, and sent to serve as astropaths, communicators who also eventually burn out. The most powerful are taken below. Not even the highest officers on the black ships know what happens next. They are not told. They are not meant to ask. Only a select few, the choir masters and the custodians of the Golden Throne, know the true fate of the strongest psychers. They are not made into servants. They are made into fuel. The entire system is a machine of cruelty. And yet, within it lies the truth of the Imperium's existence. Survival at any cost. Without the black ships, the psychers would run rampant. The warp would boil over with uncontrolled energy. Planets would fall to demonic incursions. Starships would vanish. The Astronomican would fade. The Imperium would die. This is the equation carved into the heart of every ship, every handler, every silent sister. It is not justice. It is not mercy. It is function. Some whisper that among the psychers taken, a few are not fed to the throne or made into tools. Some vanish even deeper into Terra's forbidden zones, experimented on by the Ordo Chronos or fed into the vaults of forbidden science. Others might be stolen by rival factions, the Alpha Legion, the Black Ships of traitors, or Xenos operatives. The Black Ships do not speak of losses. They report success or they do not return. So they continue, sailing the stars with their black hulls and empty promises. Every arrival is a reminder that the Imperium survives not through strength or faith, but through blood and fear. And when the Black Ships leave, their holds full of the lost and the damned, the people left behind do not cheer. They simply exhale. Until the next time the sky goes black. They do not have names anymore, not in any way that matters. To the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, they are designations, numbers, coordinates, categories. Yet once they were dreamers, visionaries. Terrified young psychers from across the Imperium, pulled from a million worlds and handed over to the Black Ships. But they were not consumed. Not immediately. Not like the others. These were different. Stronger, brighter. And so they were taken below, deeper than most can imagine, into the sanctum where no light reaches and no voices rise above a whisper. There they became something else. They became the hidden choir. They are not a choir in the way mortals might understand. There are no hymns, no mouths that move in song, no instrument save pain and psychic resonance. The hidden choir is a vast latticework of linked minds, stretched and woven together into a psychic matrix that amplifies the Emperor's will. They do not speak, they do not think, they do not sleep. Their minds have been unmade, scraped clean, and reforged into tuning forks of raw thought. They are the harmonics of the Astronomican. Each member of the choir was once among the most potent psychers the Imperium could find. Not merely strong, but attuned. Their warp signature resonated in a way that could be synchronized with others. Alone, they were dangerous. Together, they are devastating. Not in battle, not in violence, but in potential. The potential to focus, stabilize, and project the Emperor's psychic light across the galaxy. The process of binding them is cruel beyond words. First, their individuality is stripped through psychic excision, a surgery not of flesh, but of soul. Memories are shredded, egos unraveled. Then they are interlinked, not through machines, but through ritual and neuropsychic grafting. Their minds are melted and poured into the structure of the Astronomican like molten metal, filling a mold. What remains is not a collection of people, but a single psychic organism, a living signal, pulsing with barely contained power. They do not die quickly. Their bodies are sustained artificially, intravenously fed, hydrated, and oxygenated. Some have been alive, if that word still applies, for decades. Their bodies wither, their skin blackens, but their brains are constantly stimulated, kept alight not for thought, but for function. They are not meant to endure joy or sadness, only resonance. Each one becomes a key in a vast psychic chord, vibrating in time with the Emperor's immobile mind. Some within the Adeptus Astra Telepathica believe that these souls still dream. That in the liminal space between obliteration and endurance, they exist in a shared psychic hallucination, a false world built of fractured memories and collective madness. In this dreamscape, they may imagine they are still people, still walking the streets of their homeworlds, unaware of their true fate. Whether this is mercy or further cruelty is unclear. The Imperium does not ask. The choir must function. That is all that matters. It is said that when the Emperor's will pulses through the choir, it causes pain, not metaphorical, but true, searing agony. Some psychers scream, even without mouths. Some contort so violently their bones break, even within their restraints. Their minds are fire paths through which a god's will flows, and fire does not ask for permission. Yet no matter how intense the pain, no one is removed from the choir. They are bound until they burn out. Then they are replaced. The choir is hidden because to reveal it would invite questions the Imperium cannot afford to answer. It is a paradox at the heart of its faith, that the Emperor, the divine protector of mankind, demands the obliteration of its brightest souls to merely exist. The ecclesiarchy does not speak of the hidden choir. The Inquisition ensures that those who learn too much are silenced. Even among the High Lords, few know the full extent of what happens beneath the Golden Throne. There are rare moments whispered of in dread when the choir falters, when a discordant note echoes through the Astronomican, when a member resists, even for an instant, the entire construct shudders. The light flickers. Navigators report anomalies, ships veer off course. Thousands may die from one lost mind. And so the choir is monitored with obsessive vigilance. Sidetrackers, null sisters, and servitor technicians swarm the lattice constantly, repairing, replacing, recalibrating. Yet despite all this, the system is failing, slowly. Inevitably. The choir burns through psychers faster than ever before. The strain of 10,000 years has worn thin the threads of even the strongest minds. The choir is stretched, overburdened, and still the black ships must bring more. Always more. Always new voices to replace the ones that fade into silence. They are called the hidden choir because they are never seen. Because their screams echo only in the warp. Because their sacrifice is so vast, so obscene, that even in an Imperium built on cruelty, it cannot be named. They are the lost harmonics, the buried singers of the Emperor's will. Their song is not heard by ears, but felt across the stars. And every ship that sails, every world that is not lost to the warp, does so only because their minds are still burning. What happens to a soul when it is torn apart by godlight? Not destroyed in the physical sense, but unraveled at the level of spirit, reduced not to ash, but to echo, to a pain that has no end and no language. That is the question at the heart of the Astronomican's toll. For the Imperium, the consumed psychers are gone, spent, functionally erased. But there are theories, rumors, even confessions whispered by those too close to the source that suggest something worse, that the death offered by the Astronomican is not a true ending but a beginning of another kind of torment. The Adeptus Astrotelepathica does not speak of it, and the Ecclesiarchy denies it outright. But over the millennia, fragments have leaked. Astropaths driven mad by glimpses of the Astronomican have scrawled images of screaming faces, not of demons, but of humans, half-burned and eyeless, reaching out from the light. Navigators, trained to interpret the Astronomican as a guiding flame, have reported shapes within the beam, silhouettes twisted in permanent agony, drifting like embers in a current. These visions are dismissed as stress hallucinations, but they repeat, across centuries, across bloodlines. They are too consistent to be coincidence. What if the psychers consumed by the Astronomican do not cease to exist? What if their deaths, designed to fuel the psychic lighthouse, actually bind their souls to the construct in perpetuity? The Golden Throne does not merely kill. It transforms, it links, it weaves together thousands of minds in a psychic furnace, and what is burned does not always vanish. Some believe the Astronomican contains within it a residue, a psychic imprint of every soul it has devoured. Over 10,000 years, that would mean billions. A sea of agony stitched together into one unbearable scream. This theory, whispered among renegade scholars, radical inquisitors, and condemned sorcerers, is known as the infinite choir. Not the functioning lattice of psychers kept alive to channel the Emperor's power, but the psychic remnants of those already spent. The infinite choir is said to be a spectral layer within the Astronomican, a tormented echo chamber of mind ghosts, aware only of their pain, trapped forever in the resonance of the beacon. They have no bodies, no voices, but they feel. And some say they hate. If this is true, then the Astronomican is not a light, but a wound, a hole in reality stuffed with the anguish of uncountable dead. It would mean that every ship guided by its flame passes through the chorus of the damned. That every journey through the warp is made possible by ghosts screaming to be released. The horror of this idea is too much for the Imperium to admit. It would undermine not just the function of the Astronomican, but the very moral foundation of the Emperor's sacrifice. Yet the signs are there. There are navigators who have gone blind, not from warp exposure, but from what they saw in the beam. Eyes burned, not by brightness, but by unbearable sorrow. There are Adeptus Custodes, who have stood too long near the throne and emerged weeping without knowing why. There are reports of mechanical failures in the Astronomican sanctum, accompanied by sudden outbursts of psychic wailing that cannot be traced to any living psyker. Even the Sisters of Silence, whose null auras should protect them from all warp echoes, have been known to shiver near the heart of the Astronomican, and they do not speak of what they feel. The Adeptus Mechanicus treats these anomalies as static, psychic interference. The Inquisition declares them heresy. But the infinite choir remains a myth whispered in dark corners, a truth too terrible to investigate. Because if it is real, then the Imperium is not merely built on sacrifice, it is built on unending torment. And the Emperor, silent on his throne, must either be unaware of this psychic residue, or worse, aware and accepting. Some radicals suggest that the souls within the Astronomican could be reached, that with the right rituals, the right psychic frequency, one could communicate with the infinite choir. These heretical rituals have been attempted, always with catastrophic results. Whole ships lost. Entire astropathic choirs driven mad. One such attempt was said to have triggered a brief silence in the Astronomican signal, causing navigational catastrophes across Segmentum Solar. Officially, it never happened. What does it mean for humanity if its guiding light is made of unending screams? What does it mean for the Emperor if the most holy flame in the galaxy is also its most damning pyre? And what does it mean for the Psychers if death is not escape, but only the beginning of a pain that transcends flesh, time, and space? These questions have no safe answers. Only the flame continues to burn, bright and unwavering, while deep within, the souls of the sacrificed may still cry out unheard, unseen, but never ever silent. To look into the warp is to go mad. But to look into the Astronomican is to feel something deeper than madness, something closer to spiritual vertigo. The Imperium speaks of it as a light, a guiding star, a fixed point in the howling dark of the immaterium. But to those who can truly see it, the Astronomican is no simple beacon. It is a roaring storm, a rupture, a contradiction made manifest. For though it is meant to be a tool of stability, it distorts the warp around it in ways too vast to measure and too dangerous to fully understand. Imagine the warp as an ocean, not of water, but of thought, emotion, and shifting unreality. Now imagine a bonfire lit in the middle of that ocean, a fire so immense that it vaporizes the waves around it, sending shock waves of pressure and heat for light years. That fire is the Astronomican. It doesn't just shine, it warps the warp. It pulls psychic currents into itself, bends the tides, crushes minor disturbances, and destabilizes major ones. Its presence reshapes the immaterium across thousands of light years, not by force, but by inevitability. This is how navigators follow its light, not by seeing it with their physical eyes, but by sensing the psychic gravity it exerts. They describe it not as a point of light, but as a pressure, a pull that aligns their senses like a magnet aligns iron. It becomes the reference point by which all other warp motion is measured. It is the one constant in an otherwise fluid and deceptive reality. And that constancy comes at a terrible price. The Astronomican radiates psychic power like a sun flares radiation. It creates eddies, voids, anomalies. Warp storms bend around it like wind curling around a mountain. In some regions, this creates calm corridors, safe passages that allow fleets to travel swiftly and with relative safety. But in others, the interference is worse than chaos. It creates mirages, dead zones, or pulses of psychic static that confuse even the most gifted navigators. It's a paradox. The light that guides also blinds. The tool that grants stability also seeds instability in places too far or too close to its reach. And then there is what it draws. The Astronomican is not invisible to the warp. Quite the opposite. It is a wound in the veil, a lighthouse visible to every creature that swims in the sea of souls. To the daemons of the warp, it is a shining wound, a searing intrusion of order into their domain of madness. Some recoil from it, sensing the presence of the Emperor's will, a force anathema to their essence. Others are drawn to it, enraged or hungry, like moths to a flame that also promises death. For this reason, the Astronomican is a constant battlefield, a psychic warfront where demonic intelligences test the perimeter, gnawing at the edges of its light. There are accounts, buried in forbidden tomes and recovered astropathic screams, of demons attempting to possess or disrupt the Astronomican's psychic resonance. Some seek to slip into the minds of the choir members, to introduce a single discordant note into the harmony, a flaw that could destabilize the entire construct. Others hurl themselves at the beacon in blind fury, dissolving in psychic annihilation, but leaving behind ripples that travel across the warp, sowing chaos and fear. The Imperium defends against these threats with layers of psychic fortification, rituals, and the constant vigilance of the Sisters of Silence and the Adeptus Custodes. But defense is never perfect. The Astronomican pulses with psychic pain, and in that pain, doors open. Briefly. Horrifically. Entire chambers have been lost to demonic intrusion, only to be purged with fire and nullification fields. The light always recovers, but the scars remain. What is most terrifying is the growing sense that the Astronomican's relationship with the warp is changing. Once it was a steady flame. Now some say it flickers. Warp storms seem less predictable. Navigation becomes more dangerous. The choir burns through psychers faster than ever. It is as if the warp itself is learning, adapting to the presence of the flame, growing angrier, more cunning. Or perhaps it is the Emperor's will that is faltering, his psychic grip weakening after 10 millennia of constant effort. And if that is true, then the Astronomican may become not a beacon, but a breach. Not a light that keeps the dark at bay, but a chasm through which the dark might flood in. Some whisper that it could even become a lure, a false light that draws the Imperium ships into traps, into regions of warp space now claimed by powers beyond imagining. For now, it still shines. For now, it still serves. But the Imperium cannot afford to ask what the Astronomican truly is. It cannot afford to wonder what it might become. It must believe in the light. It must trust in the Emperor's silence, even as the warp boils around it, even as daemons scream in its reflection, even as the souls of the lost are consumed to keep it burning. He has not spoken in 10,000 years, not truly. No words have passed his lips, no commands, no guidance, no reassurance. And yet, his will burns brighter than a star, not in voice but in hunger. The Emperor bound to the golden throne has become more than a man, more than a god. He has become a need that consumes. And the Astronomican, that blinding beacon of his presence, is not only his voice across the warp, it is his appetite made manifest. There are those who argue the Emperor is still alive, that his mind endures, that he thinks, observes, guides. The navigators say they can feel intention within the Astronomican's pulse, as if the light subtly shifts, aligns, responds. They call it the Emperor's gaze. Astropaths sometimes describe dreams of a vast, unmoving eye, watching them from behind the flame. They feel awe. They feel terror. But they always feel it as aware. Others, more cynical or perhaps more honest, claim that the Emperor is not alive in any sense that matters. That he is no more than psychic inertia, the residual echo of a god's mind hard-coded into the psychic lattice. The Astronomican is a machine, they argue, and the Emperor is its last living code, slowly fragmenting with time. To them, what appears as guidance is simply the ghost of an algorithm, echoing through the remains of a once boundless consciousness. But a darker belief stirs among the forbidden sects, among the radical inquisitors, the more esoteric navigators, and the warped descendants of long-lost psyker cults. This belief does not see the Emperor as dead or unconscious. It sees him as awake, aware, and endlessly hungry. According to this view, the Emperor requires the psychers not just as fuel for the Astronomican, but as sustenance. He feeds on them, not their flesh, but their souls. He consumes their essence to maintain his tenuous grasp on existence, to fuel his light, to keep his awareness tethered to reality. Every psyker burned in the Astronomican is not merely sacrificed. They are devoured. If this is true, then the Astronomican is not a lighthouse. It is a mouth. This theory would mean the Emperor is no longer who he once was. That in the long isolation, the endless torrent of psychic power, and the decay of his physical form, he has become something else. A being no longer bound by human morality or even sentience, but something closer to a warped predator. A singularity of need, of hunger, of light that annihilates as it guides. The signs are subtle but haunting. The increasing rate of psyker consumption. The growing instability of the choir. The changes in the Astronomican's harmonic resonance. Some within the Adeptus Astrotelepathica have recorded minor shifts in the beacon's psychic signature, frequencies that were never present before. Like a whisper beneath the song, like a heartbeat in the fire. And then there are the visions. Rare, forbidden accounts from psychers moments before their immolation. They speak of being drawn into a vast presence, not comforting, but immense and cold. Some describe a throne of bone beneath a burning sky. Others see a figure wrapped in flame, faceless, enormous, who opens its mouth not to speak, but to consume. They are not delusions, these accounts insist. They are moments of contact. To believe in the Emperor's hunger is to see the Imperium in a new, darker light. Every shrine, every cathedral, every prayer becomes not an act of devotion, but an offering. Every black ship becomes a delivery system, bringing not just psychers, but food. The entire Imperium becomes a harvesting engine, feeding a god who may no longer remember what it means to be human. And yet the light persists. The Astronomican still guides ships, it still allows the Imperium to function, to survive. Does that justify the price? Is it salvation if it comes through endless consumption? Is the Emperor a guardian or a warden, a savior or a beast in a cage made of corpses? The Imperium cannot afford to ask these questions. To question the Emperor is heresy. To doubt the Astronomican is death. But the psychers still die. The throne still hungers. And the light, that vast roaring fire in the warp, never dims. Perhaps that is the cruelest truth of all. Not that the Emperor is hungry, but that he must be. That there is no other way. That for the Imperium to live, its god must feed. And in his silence, he accepts this bargain. Every soul burned becomes part of his will. Every death becomes a meal. And the Astronomican keeps burning, keeps guiding, keeps devouring. There is no triumph in the Astronomican, only survival layered in the robes of sanctity, and beneath that, the stench of failure. For all its vastness, for all its psychic brilliance, the Astronomican stands as a monument not to unity, but to its ruin. It was never meant to be. It was born not out of vision, but out of desperation, hammered together in the death throes of the Great Crusade. And in that improvised act, the Imperium wrote its own doom in the language of sacrifice. The dream was never this. The dream was a webway empire. Clean, untouchable, outside the reach of the warp's corruption. The Emperor's plan had been grander than any now living can imagine. A realm connected by ancient alien pathways, immune to demonic incursion, beyond the predation of chaos. The Golden Throne was a key to that vision, a stabilizer for the webway's delicate dimensional architecture. And then it failed. Then Magnus screamed, then Horus fell, and the galaxy burned. The Astronomican was a compromise, a contingency never meant to be permanent. But it worked. That was the great tragedy. It worked well enough to survive. And in that survival, the Imperium forgot the failure that birthed it. The Golden Throne, instead of being a gateway, became a tomb. The Emperor, instead of rising to divinity through triumph, ascended through crucifixion. And the Imperium, instead of transcending the warp, chained itself to it. Unity was the promise. The Pax Imperialis, the Great Crusade's endgame, was meant to bind mankind into a singular destiny, a brotherhood of stars. But instead, unity fractured. The Primarchs died or vanished. The legions were broken. The Administratum, the Mechanicus, the Ecclesiarchy, all clawed for power in the vacuum left by a silent god. The Astronomican did not unify. It tethered. Like an anchor in a storm, it held the pieces in place without ever bringing them together. It is this contradiction that haunts the Astronomican. It is a tool of connection built from division. Every ship guided by its light sails through the blood of 1,000 dead psychers. Every order given from Terra echoes through an empire held together not by trust, but by fear. The Imperium does not believe in unity. It believes in control. And the Astronomican is its most effective form of control. A leash stretched across the stars. The psychers who feed it are told they die for the greater good. But that good has no shape, no future, only continuity. The Imperium no longer speaks of progress, only survival. The Astronomican is not the path to a brighter tomorrow. It is the mechanism by which the same yesterday is repeated forever, with more corpses and fewer answers. And perhaps that is the true cost. Not the lives spent, not the psychers immolated, but the dream abandoned. In the days of the Great Crusade, humanity looked upward with purpose. Now it looks inward with fear. The stars are no longer challenges to be met, but threats to be endured. The warp is not to be understood, but endured. And the Astronomican is not a miracle. It is the chain that keeps the Imperium from drifting into the abyss, but also the chain that keeps it from ever moving forward. Even the Emperor, in whatever awareness he may retain, must see this. Must feel the failure embedded in the construct. The flame he fuels does not enlighten, it blinds, it silences, it cages. What was meant to guide now binds, what was meant to inspire now consumes. The lost souls of the Astronomican are not only the psychers fed to its fire, they are the billions who live and die under its light without ever questioning its price. They are the worlds that orbit in enforced obedience, the high lords who plot and scheme, mistaking preservation for power. The servants who pray to a god who cannot answer. They are all part of the choir now. Not in voice, but in fate. Unity died with the Webway project, with the Emperor's body, with Horus's betrayal, and in its place rose something else. Something vast, terrible, and eternal. Not a union, but a suspension. The Astronomican is the glue that holds together a broken empire, and it does so by devouring those bright enough to see how broken it truly is. The Imperium does not build, it remembers. It does not create, it preserves. The Astronomican ensures that it never forgets the cost of its own failure, and that it can never afford to change. Terra is dead. It lives in name, in memory, in myth. It breathes only because the machines refuse to stop. It spins because the stars demand it. But the planet that was once Earth, cradle of humanity, heart of civilization, blue jewel of the cosmos, is gone. In its place is the ruin of Terra. A continent-sized mausoleum wreathed in toxic clouds, shrouded in choking incense, and buried beneath layers of ferrocrete, faith, and filth. The Astronomican burns from its heart like a radioactive ulcer, seeping psychic fire into the sky, turning the world into a furnace of souls. There is no sky on Terra anymore, not one that can be seen. The atmosphere is so polluted with industry, prayer smoke, reactor fumes, and psychic fallout that light barely penetrates. The sun is a memory. The stars are forgotten. A permanent twilight reigns, filtered through cathedrals of ash and towers of bone. Terra does not sleep or wake. It simply persists, always busy, always grinding. The city has consumed the world. There is no green, no ocean, no open land. Only hive upon hive, a planetary crust of habitation and agony stacked upon itself, like a scab that never stops bleeding. At the center of this nightmare lies the Imperial Palace, if one can call it that. It is not a palace in the traditional sense, not a single building, but a city of impossible scale. A continent-wide complex of temples, data vaults, laboratories, shrines, bunkers, and vaults, buried under kilometers of defenses and watched by the most elite warriors in the galaxy. The Astronomican lies deep within, pulsing like the heart of a starless sun, fed by rivers of psyker blood and monitored by orders so secretive their names are erased from history. But the palace is not the only horror. The entire planet has been reshaped to support it. Mountains were leveled. Oceans were drained. Ancient cities were ground into the dust to make room for shrines no one remembers how to enter. The tectonic plates groan under the weight of 10,000 years of construction. The very crust of Terra is riddled with tunnels, machines, and forgotten sanctums. Some say there are levels so deep they touch the mantle, filled with failed experiments, ancient AI, or worse. Terra is haunted. Not by ghosts in the traditional sense, but by memory. Every corner of the planet groans with the weight of what once was. Beneath the endless chapels, one can still find the ruins of ancient cities, fossilized traces of a time when Earth was beautiful, when the sky was blue, when life was not measured in indentured servitude and silent sacrifice. These relics are ignored, buried, or sanctified into incomprehensible shrines. The ecclesiarchy paints over history with gold leaf and scripture, turning ruins into symbols, not lessons. The people of Terra are prisoners, not in the legal sense, but in spirit. They are born into service, raised in shadow, and taught to worship the very machine that consumes them. Most never see the surface, most never see the sky. They live their entire lives in the hive levels, working, praying, dying, only to be replaced by the next generation. Their suffering is unseen, their deaths are unmarked. They are told they serve the Emperor, that their pain is holy, but they do not serve the Emperor, they serve the flame, they serve the Astronomican. And the flame never rests. The Astronomican's presence on Terra is not benign. Its psychic output bleeds into the land. Sensitive individuals go mad. Entire districts are afflicted with night terrors, seizures, or spontaneous acts of violence. The warp seeps through cracks in reality near its epicenter. Tech priests report machines that scream. Nulls describe zones where emotion dies. Daemons whisper at the edges, drawn to the beacon, restrained only by constant ritual and the silent vigilance of the sisters. Everything on Terra revolves around the Astronomican. The traffic lanes, the supply chains, the power grids, the sacred rotations of labor and death. It is not just a beacon. It is a tyrant. It dictates the rhythms of the world, demanding ever more psychers, ever more energy, ever more sacrifice. The planet is collapsing under its weight, spiritually and physically, but no one can stop it. To stop the Astronomican is to doom the Imperium, and so the ruin must endure. What remains of Terra's soul? Only echoes, only myths, only the lie that this place is holy, that the Emperor watches from his throne, that his will flows outward to guide humanity. But the truth is etched into the stone and smoke. Terra is a corpse. The Astronomican is the fire that burns within its hollowed chest, not to give it life, but to keep the rest of the galaxy from freezing in the dark. And still the flame burns, still the people bow, still the sacrifice continues. Because there is no alternative, because Terra is no longer the center of hope. It is the furnace of despair, and the light it gives off is not salvation. It is the slow, steady pyre of a species that forgot how to dream. They walk among the burning, silent, unblinking, cloaked in absence. The Sisters of Silence do not speak, not because they cannot, but because they must not. Their silence is not a vow, it is a necessity, a shield, a blade. They are nulls, blanks, anathema to the warp. Where they walk, psychic power dies. Where they stand, the whispers of daemons are drowned. And on Terra, in the shadow of the Astronomican, their presence is more than sacred. It is essential. For without them, the light would consume everything. Most imagine the Astronomican as a radiant psychic engine, managed by the Adeptus Mechanicus and powered by the Emperor, but few truly grasp what it is like to exist within its orbit. It is not serene. It is not orderly. It is a roiling maelstrom of raw psychic fury, a volcano of soul energy erupting endlessly from the Emperor's broken will. The golden throne is its heart, but the fire flows outward through labyrinthine vaults, corridors of resonance, and sanctified chambers that shimmer with the heat of unfiltered mind stuff. To work near it is to stand in the breath of a god. And without the Sisters, it would be impossible. They patrol the choir crypts, the domains where psychers are bound into the Astronomican's structure. These chambers pulse with residual thought, flashes of memory, screams not spoken but felt. The Sisters absorb it all in silence. Their null auras neutralize the psychic echoes, preventing the buildup of dangerous warp energy. Without them, the choir's collective agony could spiral into a feedback storm, a psychic implosion that might rupture the very lattice holding the Emperor's light in place. But their role is more than containment. They are executioners. When a psyker bound to the Astronomican resists, when a fragment of ego fights back, when a note in the choir goes sour, the Sisters are called. Not to correct, to end. With a touch, a glance, or a stroke of their wordless blades, they unmake the problem. The psyker vanishes, not merely killed, but extinguished, erased from the warp, as if they had never existed. This is their mercy. This is their justice. And still, they do not speak. There are psychers who have served in the Astronomican choir for months, even years, who have never heard a voice, never seen a smile, only the looming presence of the Sisters. Always watching, always measuring, always judging. Their silence is a mirror. It reflects back everything the Imperium will not say, that the sacrifices made here are not noble, that the pain endured here is not holy, that the Emperor does not answer prayers, only absorbs them. Some psychers come to fear the Sisters more than death, not because they are cruel, but because they are final. A Sister's presence is like gravity in reverse, a pull that strips away warmth, connection, memory. To be near them is to be alone, truly and completely. There are reports of choir members who begged for death simply to escape the weight of that void. And when they beg, the Sisters say nothing. They only act. There's a terrible beauty in them. Clad in bronze and black, faces often hidden behind emotionless masks, they resemble statues, relics from a time before humanity even understood the warp. Their armor is etched with symbols few can read. Their weapons are simple, elegant, and absolute. They need no words. Their presence is their answer, and they are everywhere. Not just within the Astronomican, but in the vaults of the Emperor's chamber, in the training halls of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, in the deepest recesses of Terra where experiments touch the edge of the immaterial, where psychers gather, the Sisters follow. They are humanity's last defense against the corruption of its own mind, and the fact that they are needed at the Astronomican's core, needed constantly, speaks volumes. It means the Emperor's light is not stable, that the fire must be watched, that the psychic machine that guides the Imperium is forever on the brink of breaking. Without the Sisters, it would have broken long ago. Their silence is the scaffold upon which the galaxy's greatest lie is balanced. Do they believe in what they do? No one knows. They do not write memoirs. They do not share confessions. They are not permitted even the comfort of psychic communion. Only the most radical among the Inquisition or the Custodes have spoken of what lies within a sister's mind, a vast, empty calm, not peace, not emotionlessness, but the absence of noise. And within that silence, a flicker of something else, not obedience, not loyalty, duty. They do not serve the Emperor, they serve the necessity of the Emperor. Their silence is not sacred because of what it hides, it is sacred because of what it endures. And so they stand, unmoved, unspeaking, in the furnace of the Astronomican, in the agony of psychers, in the silence of the Emperor, holding the line, not against chaos, but against collapse, and always, without a word. They were born to see the light, not with eyes, but with the eye, that strange, swirling organ nested in their foreheads, a genetic curse and a navigational gift. The navigators of the Imperium are not fully human. They are something else. A specialized mutation passed down through ancient bloodlines, a divergence cultivated across millennia to serve one function, to look into the warp and not be devoured by it. And for that, they must see the Astronomican. But what they see is not a beacon. Not really. To a navigator, the Astronomican is a storm given shape, a flame so bright it bends thought around it. It is not a fixed point of light but a throbbing presence, vast and unknowable, that pulses in rhythms only their third eye can decipher. The navigators navigate not by sight, but by interpretation, translating the psychic roar of the Astronomican into direction, motion, and survival. This ability is not passive. It is not easy. Each jump through the warp, each journey between stars, is a trial. Navigators stare into the raw heart of unreality, guided only by the flickering stability of the Astronomican. It is like staring into the sun while walking a tightrope over a pit of screaming souls. One mistake, one misreading, and the ship is lost. Sometimes forever. And the cost is not only to the ship, it is to the navigator. Prolonged exposure to the Astronomican burns through them. Not physically, though some suffer bleeding, blindness, or seizures, but spiritually. Their minds fray, their dreams are warped by the beacon's resonance. Some wake screaming, others are silent for days. The oldest navigators, those who have charted thousands of warp jumps, often speak in riddles, as if their thoughts have been bent to match the currents they've endured. Among them, there is awe. And there is fear. Some describe the Astronomican as beautiful. A god song of light and order, resonating across the sea of madness. They believe it is the Emperor's love made visible, a sign that even in death, he watches. They speak of harmonic patterns, of pulses that feel like the heartbeat of a father who cannot die. To them, the light is sacred and each voyage a prayer, but others see something different. They speak of faces in the fire, of shadows between pulses, of moments when the light dims and they glimpse something vast behind it, something that watches them as they watch it. Some say the Astronomican speaks to them, not in words, but in pressure and rhythm, offering glimpses of futures that never come to pass. These navigators are often withdrawn, erratic, sometimes labeled mad, but their charts are uncannily accurate. The Imperium keeps them working, even as their minds unravel. There are horror stories, navigators who lost their way in the warp despite the Astronomican's pull, who found themselves guided not to their destination, but to a grave. Some believe the light is not always what it seems, that it can be mimicked, that something in the warp might be learning to echo it, to lure navigators into traps. These are heresies, of course. The Navis Nobilite buries such tales, but every navigator knows the truth. The warp lies. And sometimes, even the light can deceive. Their families protect them. The Navis Nobilite is a closed, incestuous web of ancient dynasties, each guarding its bloodline like a treasure. Within their void ships and palaces, navigators are treated like living relics, pampered, protected, but never free. They are bred for one purpose, and when their usefulness fades, they are retired, sometimes with ceremony, sometimes without. The lucky ones die quickly. The unlucky ones fade into madness, seeing the Astronomican even when they sleep, even when their eye is closed. No one outside their kind truly understands what it means to see the Astronomican. To see not light, but intent. Not direction, but judgment. They navigate the warp, yes, but they also navigate the Emperor's will. They do not merely see where to go, they see why they go. And in that why, they sometimes glimpse truths too heavy to bear. Some navigators claim to have seen the moment the Astronomican flickered. To them, it was not a failure of machinery or sacrifice. It was a moment of doubt, as if the Emperor hesitated, as if the fire dimmed because the will behind it wavered. These navigators rarely survive long. The Inquisition watches their kind closely. And yet they continue, because the Imperium cannot move without them, because every starship that sails must have a navigator, because every navigator must have the Astronomican, and because no matter how much it burns they must look. So they stare into the flame, again and again, their lives shortened, their minds frayed, their bloodlines thinned by centuries of selective breeding. And still they see, because they must, because if they don't, the Imperium is lost, and so they endure the visions, the beauty, the horror, and they call it duty. It begins slowly. First, a faint ripple in the warp, a shiver that spreads across the navigator's senses like a sudden silence in a crowded room. Then, reports trickle in. A vessel, days overdue, vanishes without trace. An astropathic message mid-transmission turns to static. A navigator weeps in their chamber, unable to locate the Astronomican's pulse. And then the whisper rises from the lower decks, among the voidsmen and deck serfs. The light is flickering. The Astronomican is more than a navigational tool. It is the nervous system of the Imperium. It allows for coherence across 1,000,000 worlds, for armies to move, for orders to be given, for aid to arrive. Without it, the Imperium is not weakened, it is paralyzed. And when the Astronomican falters, even for a moment, the effects are catastrophic. There have been times, few but real, when the beacon dimmed. During the Age of Apostasy, during the 13th Black Crusade, during the Noctis Aeterna, following the fall of Cadia. In each instance, the Astronomican's power weakened, and the result was more than logistical failure. It was existential terror. The void became hostile. Warp storms erupted in seemingly stable regions. Entire fleets were lost. Entire sectors fell silent. Even now, no one knows how many worlds died in those brief silences. How many were isolated, invaded, consumed, forgotten. When the light flickers, fear becomes prophecy. Navigators report disorientation. Some scream, some vomit, some collapse unconscious. Their charts fail. Their third eye shows them only a swirling fog of pain. The Astronomican, normally a constant psychic pressure, becomes erratic. Some describe it pulsing like a dying heart. Others say it becomes distorted like a voice screaming underwater. Ships become stranded, blind in the warp. Even those who try to emerge into real space often miscalculate their exit points, emerging years or light years from their intended destination. Some emerge never at all. For most citizens of the Imperium, the consequences are felt in silence. A missing delivery becomes a famine. A delayed military fleet becomes a planetary invasion. A broken astropathic relay becomes a mutiny that spirals into planetary secession. The Imperium is a structure held together by threads, and when the light flickers, those threads snap. But there is more to the flicker than logistics. The psychic pain spreads. Astropaths across the galaxy suffer simultaneous seizures. Some burn out entirely, their minds overloaded by the resonance failure. Psychers become unstable. On certain hive worlds, riots break out seemingly unprovoked, the population feeling, without understanding, that something immense has shifted. The ecclesiarchy preaches harder, louder, trying to drown out the growing sense of dread with louder hymns, and the demons notice. When the Astronomican dims, the warp surges. Creatures once held at bay by the Emperor's flame grow bold. Possessions increase. Sorcerers report easier ritual success. The veil thins. Entire systems, once marginally safe, become demonic hunting grounds overnight. It is as if the warp itself knows that the gatekeeper is faltering, and it tests the boundaries with eager claws. The High Lords of Terra panic in silence. To admit weakness is to invite collapse. Officially, the Astronomican has never faltered. It has always remained strong. But deep within the Adeptus Mechanicus vaults, there are logs, measurements, patterns of energy fluctuations that do not match prior harmonics. The choirmasters have grown more cautious. They replace psychers faster. The Sisters of Silence increase their patrols. And the custodes stand closer to the throne, as if expecting the end. The worst part is the uncertainty. No one knows exactly what causes the flicker. Is it the Emperor's will faltering? Is the Golden Throne finally breaking? Is it external interference, a ritual from a chaos god, or an echo of some ancient war? Or is it simply age? 10,000 years of sustained psychic projection was never meant to be possible. The Emperor is held together by machinery older than most stars. It should have failed long ago. And perhaps now finally it is. There are contingency plans, at least there are said to be. Deep within the black vaults, among the Ordo Chronos and the darkest sects of the Inquisition, rumors whisper of Project Anathema, or Echo Drive 9, or the False Choir. Each a possible replacement, none proven, and none as strong as the real thing. The Astronomican flickers. Not every day, not yet, but more than before, and with each pulse, each silence, the Imperium waits, holding its breath. Because it knows what comes next, not failure, not war, but unmaking. When the light flickers, everything falters, and if it ever goes out, truly out, there will be no dawn, only the void, only the warp, only the screams of ships lost forever and the death of a galaxy that can no longer find itself. When the last psyker burns, what will be left of the Imperium? The Astronomican is not eternal, it cannot be. Even the most faithful, in their deepest silence, must know this. The Golden Throne is failing. The flow of psychers, once endless, now thins in places. The choir falters. The warp grows louder. The light flickers. There will come a day when the black ships arrive at Terra, and there are no more replacements. When the final voices scream into the Astronomican's core and then go silent, and on that day, the last soul will burn. What then? Some believe the Emperor will die. That when the last offering is made and the choir ceases, the light will fade and the corpse throne will grow cold. The Emperor's will, whether it still lingers as mind or merely inertia, will collapse, unanchored. The flame will gutter out, and with it, the last great bond of the Imperium will dissolve. No more guidance, no more cohesion, just 1,000 isolated systems, blind in the void, each surrounded by enemies and forgotten by the stars. But others, the dreamers and the mad, whisper of something stranger. They say the Emperor is waiting, not for more psychers, not for repair, but for release. That the sacrifice has never been about survival, but containment. That for 10,000 years, the Golden Throne has not only broadcast the Astronomican, but sealed something inside. Not just the Emperor's will, but his becoming, his evolution into a being of true godhood. And that when the final soul is consumed, when the machinery fails and the song ends, it will not be the end of the Emperor but his rebirth. This belief, heretical in every form, imagines a future where the Emperor rises not from healing but from hunger. Where every psyker burned was a step toward apotheosis. Where the pain was not only fuel but transformation, a chrysalis of death from which something divine might emerge. A star god, a psychic singularity. Not the man he was, but the god he must become. But there are darker dreams too. That when the last soul burns, it is not the Emperor who rises, but something else. That the 10,000 years of agony, of sacrifice, of madness, have twisted him. That the man who once wept for humanity, who created the Primarchs and dreamed of unity, is gone, and in his place is a being of such focused will and power that it no longer remembers love, or mercy, or hope. That the Astronomican is not his will, it is his scream. If so, the Imperium's final days may not be a collapse, they may be a reckoning. The light that guided 1,000,000 ships could become a weapon, a lash of psychic fire across the warp, burning worlds, boiling stars. Not to punish, not to avenge, but simply because there is nothing left but fire. The Emperor, at last unbound, might look upon his works and find them wanting. He may unmake it all, the ecclesiarchy, the Inquisition, the Imperium itself, and seek to begin again, alone, without error. Or perhaps nothing will happen. Perhaps the light will die and there will be only silence. The Imperium will shatter. Warp storms will swallow trade routes, daemons will rise, and humanity will return to its beginnings. Scattered tribes on scattered worlds, ignorant of each other, pray for every darkness they once held at bay. The Great Crusade will become myth. The Emperor, a memory. The Astronomican, a whisper. But even if that happens, even if the Imperium ends, the question remains, was it worth it? Were the billions of psychers, the trillions of lives guided by a flame made of screams, the centuries of suffering, were they the price of survival, or the chain that ensured a slow, inevitable extinction? That is for you, and for every soul still dreaming in the dark of the void to decide. Because as long as the light burns, someone pays. As long as the Imperium moves, someone dies. And when the light goes out, that final soul, the last to scream into the throne, will mark the end of not just the Astronomican, but of an age. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something else. Thank you for watching. If this journey through the forgotten pain and tragic purpose of the Astronomican moved you, subscribe to join us for more Warhammer lore deep dives. The Imperium hides many secrets. Let's uncover them together.